I never imagined betrayal could cut so deep until I felt the cold blade of it twisting in my heart. A furious pounding rattled the bedroom door frame. My breath hitched as I pressed my back to the hallway wall, phone clutched to my chest. Thump, thump, thump. The thin wood shook with every impact of my twin sister's fists. Through the door, I heard her shriek my name in a voice I'd never heard before, feral, panicked, desperate. Lenny, open this door. Open it now. Lydia's screech echoed down the corridor. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped my phone. On its screen, the video I just recorded waited with damning patience. The footage was only a few minutes long, but it was enough to unravel an entire lifetime. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself not to collapse into the tears and terror swirling inside me. Not yet. I had to stay strong, just a little longer. From inside the bedroom came another voice, urgent and muffled. Quimby, my husband, hissed under his breath, trying to calm Lydia down. Stop it, Lydia. Just stop, he pleaded in a harsh whisper. I could picture it, him grabbing her arm to restrain her from battering the door off its hinges. The mental image made my stomach churn. Mere minutes ago, that same man had been whispering her name in passion on the other side of that door. My stomach lurched as I peeked through the crack in the door and saw Quimby and Lydia tangled together on my bed. For a moment I couldn't breathe. But I still hit record on my phone, capturing every awful detail in silence. When I heard Quimby moan her name in the darkness, something inside me snapped. I pushed the door open wider with a trembling hand, just enough for the camera to capture them clearly in the dim afternoon light. Lydia's red lipsticked mouth fell open in a gasp of horror as she spotted me. Quimby scrambled off the bed, eyes wide, face draining of color. He opened his mouth, maybe to spout a lie, maybe to beg, but I didn't want to hear it. I'd seen everything I needed to see. Without a word, I stepped back and pulled the doors shut, leaving them frantic and fumbling on the other side. I saved the video, thumb hovering just long enough to ensure the file uploaded to the cloud, evidence secured. My entire body was shaking, but a strange cold calmness was beginning to spread through me. A part of me felt like I was floating outside myself, watching someone else's nightmare unfold. In the span of a few minutes, the life I knew had been destroyed, but I wasn't going to let these two see me shatter. When the bedroom door finally cracked open, I was ready. I stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed tightly over my chest, mostly to hold myself together. My phone was still in my hand like a weapon. Quimby appeared first, hair a mess, shirt hastily buttoned wrong. Lydia crept out from behind him, clutching the edges of a bedsheet around her body before realizing she'd hastily thrown her clothes back on. The moment they saw me standing there, their faces went ashen. Quimby's lips moved soundlessly for a second. Lydia actually took a step behind him, as if I were the threat. That's right, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I know everything. I held up my phone so they could see it. It screen blank now, but we all knew what it contained. It's over. I've sent the video of you two to Gabriel. At the mention of her husband's name, Lydia flinched as if struck. What do you mean? She stammered, eyes flicking from the phone to my face. Exactly what it sounds like, I replied softly. I could feel an eerie smile on my lips, one that didn't reach my eyes. Your husband knows. My husband's been caught. The game's up. For a split second, neither of them moved. Lydia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Quimby's shoulders slumped as the reality set in. The silence was broken by Lydia's strangled sob. You bitch, she suddenly shrieked, face contorting in rage and shame. And then she launched herself at me. I barely had time to raise my arms before she was on me, nails slashing for my face. Give me that phone, she screamed. Her fingers swiped the device out of my hand, sending it clattering to the floor between us. She didn't even pause, her hands flew at me next, grabbing a fistful of my hair. Pain shot through my scalp as Lydia yanked my head back. We grappled in a brief, ugly tangle, me trying to shove her off, her spitting incoherent fury and reaching for my throat. Stop. Lydia, stop. Quimby yelled, rushing forward. He pried her off of me, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She kicked and writhed in his grip, desperate to get at me. Her eyes, so like mine, burned with a hatred I couldn't have imagined even in our worst childhood fights. Lydia, calm down. Calm down. Quimby pleaded in her ear. He was terrified of the situation, of what I had done, of what I could do next. I saw it all over his face. He should have been terrified. I stood trembling, smoothing my pulled hair with unsteady hands. My back hit the wall. I hadn't even realized I'd been retreating from her onslaught. My twin, my sister, had just tried to claw my eyes out. A bark of bitter laughter escaped me. The absurdity was almost too much. Here we were, two 30-something women, pulling each other's hair like bratty teenagers. Over a man. Over a betrayal so grotesque I still couldn't fully process it. Quimby managed to haul Lydia a few steps back. She sagged in his arms then, bursting into hysterical tears. It's not what it looks like, she gasped between sobs, a ridiculous automatic denial. A sharp, cold rage sliced through my shock. Not what it looks like? I echoed. My voice trembled with fury now. Do not insult my intelligence, Lydia. She opened her mouth, but I barreled on, shifting my glare to Quimby. The sight of him, eyes red, hair disheveled, still protecting her behind his arm, made me nearly sick with anger. "Both of you," I said, low and shaking, "listen to me very carefully. You brought this on yourselves. I owe you nothing." "Nothing." Quimby's face crumpled. "Lenny, please," he croaked. We never meant to hurt Why." "Shut up," I snapped, and he did, eyes widening at the venom in my tone. I barely recognized my own voice. "Don't you dare ask for my forgiveness. Don't you dare tell me not to do anything rash, or try to talk me down. The time for that is long past." Lydia let out a wail. Quimby's eyes brimmed with tears. Good, I thought. Good. I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the pain coursing through me. With a cool deliberateness that belied the chaos inside me, I bent and picked up my phone from the floor. The screen was cracked, but it didn't matter, the video was safely backed up. I straightened and met their desperate, miserable faces head-on. "Get out of my house," I whispered. Quimby blinked. What?" "You heard me," I said, voice rising. "Get out. Both of you, out of here now." Quimby started to babble, taking a half step toward me with one hand raised. "Lenny, we can explain." A surge of disgust propelled me forward. I jabbed a finger toward the front door. "Leave. If you're not gone in the next 30 seconds, I swear to God I'll call the police and have you thrown out." For a moment, neither moved. Then Quimby's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of Lydia, too. She stared at me, lips trembling, eyes filled with a manic sort of fear. Without another word, Quimby guided Lydia toward the door. They edged past me, Quimby hanging his head, Lydia sniffling and avoiding my eyes. As he reached the threshold, Quimby paused. "I'm so S." I slammed the door behind them with all the strength I had left. As soon as I heard their footsteps retreat down the driveway, I collapsed onto the floor. A raw, animalistic sob ripped its way out of my throat, muffled by my hands as I tried uselessly to hold myself together. The house around me was eerily quiet now, the only sound my own ragged breathing and cries. They were gone, and they had left my life in utter ruin. I don't know how long I sat huddled on that hardwood floor, rocking and weeping. Eventually, the sound of my phone buzzing in my hand jolted me. I wiped my eyes and looked at the screen through a haze of tears. It was a call from Gabriel, Lydia's husband. Of course. He must have seen the video. With a shuddering breath, I accepted the call and put the phone to my ear. "Gabriel," I choked out. He already knew. "Lenny, oh God. I'm so sorry." Gabriel's voice was gentle, filled with sorrow. In the background, I could hear him trying to keep it together, for my sake or his own. I tried to respond, but a ragged sob escaped instead. We ended up not saying much. What was there to say? My sister and his wife. My husband and his. It was an unspeakable horror we now shared. I had a feeling, he admitted quietly. I prayed I was wrong. But I wasn't. A numb, bitter part of me felt a grim satisfaction. He had suspected Lydia, and he'd been right. If only I'd listened to my own suspicions sooner. We promised to talk more soon, perhaps all four of us together, though the thought made me sick. Before hanging up, Gabriel's voice went hard. "They'll face the consequences, Lenny. Both of them. I'll make sure of it." I knew he would. I told him I intended to do the same. When the call ended, I stayed on the floor a while longer, phone clutched to my chest. I'd stopped crying. My tears had run dry, leaving a hollow ache and one resolute thought: I have to protect my children. That night, somehow, I managed to get up off the floor and pull myself together enough to tuck my twin boys into bed. They were 12 years old and thankfully had been out of the house all afternoon at soccer practice. I plastered on a fragile smile and told them Mom wasn't feeling well, which wasn't exactly a lie. Mercifully, they didn't see through it. The next morning, I knew I had to tell them at least part of the truth. After breakfast, I sat my sons down on the couch. My hands shook a little as I held their small, warm hands in mine. "Boys," I began gently, "I need to tell you something. Your dad did something very bad. He hurt me, and because of that, he won't be living with us for a while. Maybe not ever again." Their eyes instantly sharpened with understanding far beyond their years. They looked at each other, then back at me. My older son's chin lifted. "Mom," he asked quietly, "did Dad cheat on you?" I was stunned that he'd so quickly put the pieces together. Tears welled in my eyes, but I willed myself to be strong. I gave a tiny nod, my throat too tight to speak. In that instant, both of my boys lunged forward and wrapped their arms around me. I clung to them, and they clung just as tightly to me. "It's okay," my younger son said fiercely. "We're on your side, Mom. We're with you." Fresh tears slid down my cheeks, this time out of gratitude. I kissed their foreheads and held them close, promising that no matter what, we'd be okay. In that moment, their unconditional love gave me the strength I so desperately needed. Later that day, I packed our suitcases and took the boys to my parents' house. I didn't trust myself to stay under the same roof as Quimby if he returned. My parents knew something was very wrong from the moment we showed up on their doorstep. It wasn't until the boys were in the next room, distracted by my mom's homemade pie and the TV, that I finally broke down and told my parents everything, the whole ugly story from start to finish. My mother's face went white. She covered her mouth, horrified. "Oh, my poor baby," she whispered, then she started to cry. She apologized over and over for every time she might have pushed me to appease Lydia in the past. My father, however, reacted with pure anger. He went dangerously still as I spoke, his hands curling into tight fists on the kitchen table. I could see the vein in his temple pulsing. When I finished, he let out a breath and said in a low, lethal voice, "Neither of them is ever welcome under my roof again." He meant it. In all my life, I'd rarely seen my father that enraged. For once, his fury was on my behalf, and it felt vindicating. As night fell, I realized I needed to deal with Quimby sooner rather than later. I had ignored his frantic barrage of texts and voicemails all day. I simply hadn't had the energy to face him yet. But now, sitting in my childhood home with my boys safe asleep upstairs, I opened my phone and forced myself to read his messages. As expected, they swung wildly from desperate apologies to pathetic excuses to outright pleas. "I love you, Lenny. Please talk to me. It was just a mistake. Don't do anything hasty, think of our family." It made me sick to my stomach. I turned the phone off without replying. Crying over him was a waste of my tears. A week later, I agreed to meet Quimby in person, not to reconcile, that was impossible, but to settle practical matters. We met at a quiet cafe downtown in the middle of the day. To my surprise, Lydia skulked in behind him, her face drawn and puffy. Seeing them together, side by side in rumpled clothes, unified in guilt, almost made me laugh with disgust. I didn't cause a scene. I simply informed Quimby that I would be filing for divorce immediately. In a calm, flat voice I laid out my terms. I would have full custody of our sons, of course. I expected child support and a fair split of our assets, and he was to move out of the house at once. My lawyer, whom Gabriel had helped me find, had assured me these terms were more than reasonable given the circumstances. Quimby sat there shaking, barely able to meet my eyes. Lydia hovered a step behind him, her head bowed, saying nothing. When I slid the divorce papers across the table and quietly told him to sign, he picked up the pen with a trembling hand. He didn't argue with a single demand. How could he? He scribbled his name on each line, a tear or two slipping down his face and blotting the ink. I felt strangely nothing as I watched him. When it was done, I stood and murmured, "I'll be in touch about the kids." He nodded miserably. Lydia dared to look at me then, her eyes full of tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I regarded my twin, the mirror image of me, and felt like I was staring at a stranger. I just shook my head and walked away, leaving them in that cafe without another word. The divorce went through quickly. In truth, there wasn't much to negotiate. I had all the leverage and Quimby wanted to avoid an ugly public fight, especially with that video evidence looming. Within a couple of months, I was officially a single woman again. Quimby moved out and into her place. Both he and Lydia faced serious fallout in other ways too. Quimby, for instance, lost his job. It turned out his employer didn't look kindly on an employee sneaking off during work hours to conduct an affair, especially not when an irate wife sends a video of said affair to HR. Lydia also burned her world to the ground. Gabriel divorced her immediately, of course. With her reputation in tatters, she ended up leaving her job as well. In the ultimate twist of bitter irony, Quimby and Lydia decided to make their union official. Yes, mere weeks after our divorces were finalized, those two went down to the courthouse and got married. Perhaps they felt they had no choice. They truly had no one left but each other. Almost everyone in our family cut contact with them. My parents flatly refused to even utter Lydia's name, let alone acknowledge her marriage. Socially, they were pariahs. From what I heard, they mostly kept to themselves, living quietly on the outskirts of town. And as for me, I began to heal. It's not an overnight process, of course, but day by day I found pieces of myself I thought I'd lost. I poured my energy into caring for my boys and working hard at my job. I reconnected with old friends. I even started going to therapy, which helped immensely. It gave me a safe space to process the tidal wave of emotions and learn to trust again. Gabriel became an unlikely pillar of support through all this. In the immediate aftermath, we talked often, comparing notes on lawyers, giving each other updates on the divorce proceedings, sometimes just venting or comforting one another on particularly lonely nights. He was the one who recommended the excellent divorce attorney I ended up hiring. In turn, I helped connect him with a counselor friend of mine when anger threatened to consume him. We were never more than friends. Both of us were far too raw for anything else, but a deep, understanding friendship formed between us. A few months after the dust settled, Gabriel and I met for coffee. I remember the two of us sitting in a quiet corner of a cafe, both looking healthier and calmer than we had in a while. He admitted to me then something that made my blood run cold. In the months before everything came out, Lydia had been quietly bad-mouthing me to him. Little lies here and there, that I was neglecting Quimby, that I spent too much money, that I didn't appreciate what I had. Laying the groundwork, I guess, Gabriel said bitterly. It sickened both of us to realize how calculated she had been. We sat there shaking our heads, wondering how we could have been so blind to the malice right under our noses. After that conversation, I resolved that I would never, ever let Lydia back into my life. The sister I once idolized was gone. I mourned her in my own way and then I let her go. 5 years passed. Slowly but surely, the raw edges of betrayal smoothed into scars. By year 5, I realized I hadn't shed a tear over Quimby or Lydia in a long, long time. My heart had healed, not completely, perhaps. I think some wounds never fully heal, but enough that I felt at peace. My boys were thriving in middle school, growing into such smart and kind young men that I could cry with pride. We'd moved into a new apartment of our own, just the three of us, and built a life filled with routine and laughter. I heard little to nothing about Lydia and Quimby. Occasionally, a snippet of gossip would reach my ears. Someone saw them looking sullen at the grocery store, or heard from a friend that their marriage was struggling. Two selfish people under stress. Who could be surprised? I never sought out these updates, but I can't deny that each morsel of their misfortune felt like karmic justice. Through those years, Gabriel and I stayed in touch. He eventually moved to a different city for a fresh start, but we never completely lost contact. On birthdays or holidays, he would call to say hello. Sometimes he sent my boys little gifts with notes that said, "From Uncle Gabriel," a term that always warmed me. We were connected, he and I, by this strange, painful chapter of our lives, and that connection remained. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, about 5 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected message from my lawyer. It turned out that Lydia was trying to contact me. She'd gone through him to respect my boundaries. She claimed the matter was urgent and important. I almost deleted the message on the spot. Urgent and important to her, no doubt, but certainly not to me. I owed her nothing. I was prepared to ignore the request. But when the lawyer mentioned it was a medical issue, my curiosity, or maybe just my conscience, got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a meeting. I chose a public cafe, the same one, in fact, where we'd signed the divorce, and I asked Gabriel if he would come with me. Without hesitation, he took time off work and traveled down to be there. I think we both had knots in our stomachs that day, unsure of what to expect. When Lydia walked into the cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked so frail and sickly that I honestly felt a stab of pity. Her once bright skin had turned sallow and dull, her frame thin and unsteady. Quimby hovered at her side, guiding her carefully to the table like she might collapse at any moment. They both looked humbled. They barely met my eyes as they sat down. I waited in silence until Lydia finally spoke. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began softly. I said nothing, just nodded for her to continue. She drew a shaky breath. I'm very sick, Lenny. I have end-stage renal failure. My kidneys are shutting down." I simply stared. My mind registered the words but didn't react. I wasn't about to make it easy for her. After an awkward pause, she went on haltingly, voice trembling. "I've been on dialysis, but it's only buying me time. I need a transplant. Soon. And the doctors say my best chance is a kidney from a relative. An identical twin, in particular." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes full of a naked, desperate hope. "I was hoping to praying that you might consider giving me one of yours." For a long moment, I just sat there. I'm not sure I even breathed. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. I glanced over at Quimby. He was watching me with a pleading expression, wringing his hands together. I could feel Gabriel tensing beside me, holding himself back from exploding. Quimby cleared his throat and spoke, his tone surprisingly humble. "Lenny, please. She's your sister. Your twin. If there's any chance you could..." He trailed off as Gabriel shot him a withering glare. I let out a slow, controlled exhale. "You're asking me to risk my own health and undergo major surgery for her," I said, my voice surprisingly even. Lydia burst into tears at that, covering her face with a tissue. Quimby reached over to rub her back. Anger flared hot inside me at the sight. Even now, he was comforting her, as if I was the villain here. Lydia dropped the tissue and clasped her hands together, reaching toward me. "I know I don't deserve it," she sobbed. "I know that. But I'm begging you, Lenny. If there's any tiny part of you that still cares about me, please save my life." I stared at her, this pale, shaking woman who used to be my closest flesh and blood, and felt an overwhelming mixture of emotions. Part of me did want to save her, purely out of that deep-rooted instinct that twins are supposed to have, the one that made me fiercely protective of her when we were young. But another part of me recoiled. After everything she'd put me through, how could she possibly expect me to do this? I pushed my chair back and stood. "No," I said quietly. They both looked up, not sure they heard me correctly. I stepped around the table. "No," I repeated firmly, looking directly at Lydia. "You destroyed our bond. You destroyed our family. I will not give you my kidney." My sister flinched like I'd slapped her. Quimby opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but Gabriel was already standing too, fixing them with a steely glare that dared either of them to say a word. "I'm sorry," I added, and oddly enough I meant it. Not for my decision. I felt nothing but certainty about that, but that her choices had led us all here. "I do hope you find a donor, Lydia. Truly. But it won't be me." Lydia let out a keening wail, doubling over in grief or pain or both. Quimby moved to support her, tears in his own eyes. "Please," he tried once more, voice cracking. I turned my back on them. Gabriel put a protective arm around my shoulders and guided me out of the cafe. I didn't look back. Outside, I realized I was shaking, partly from anger, partly from the adrenaline of what I'd just done. I expected to feel guilty or sad or something. Instead, I felt relief. Overwhelming relief, like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't even known I was carrying. Gabriel squeezed my shoulder gently. "You all right?" he asked. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I said, and I was telling the truth. For the record, Lydia did end up getting her transplant. A matching donor was located via the transplant registry a couple of months later. From what I heard, the surgery went well. She lived. When I found out, I was genuinely relieved. Not only that my twin's life was spared, but also that I hadn't been pressured into being the savior. It was never my responsibility to save Lydia from the consequences of her actions. Today, I live a life of relative peace. My sons are in high school now, healthy, happy, and growing into fine young men. We have a cozy apartment of our own filled with warmth and love. My parents are doting grandparents. They don't speak Lydia's name anymore. We've all tried to let go of the anger and move forward. The wounds are still there, but I don't carry their weight every single day. As for Gabriel, he remains in my life, like a quiet, steady presence. We call or text often. Sometimes he visits and joins my boys and me for dinner. In those moments, Gabriel laughing with my children over a board game, or swapping friendly banter with me as we do dishes, I feel a flicker of something warm and hopeful. We're both cautious. We've both been hurt deeply, so nothing has been rushed. But there's an unspoken understanding between us, a trust built on the foundations of what we endured together. With him, I feel safe and seen. Maybe someday I'll open my heart again. For now, I'm content focusing on my family and the love that surrounds me. The chapter of Lydia and Quimby is closed, and I'm finally free. The past will always hurt, but it no longer defines my future. As I stand here now, closing the door on all that pain, I can finally look ahead with hope.